Welcome to another wonderful podcast. This is Tiffany from Mahogany and Willow, and we have Jeanette with us as well. We are so glad you decided to join us again, and we feel very honored that you're taking the time out of your busy lives to listen to us gals and all of our amazing, interesting, fascinating stories.
Wild, crazy.
Yes. So today we're going to make a shift into a more serious, deep subject. And it's something that we've been talking about for a while. We just thought that we would have a moment where I guess I would let Jeanette tell me that it's time that we can talk about this. So that being said, I'm going to start it off by asking you, whatever you're comfortable with talking about, tell us about your journey in your story with grief.
Well, it's interesting. You know, we've talked about this before because I think our journeys with grief begin long before we're aware that they begin. That's first and foremost. I think that I have been grieving for most of my life, and I didn't know that until I was grieving in the biggest sense that I could have imagined. So there is also the idea that, you know, for those of you who don't know, my middle son, when he was 28, was diagnosed with cancer. And after a 3.5-year battle, he passed. And it was one of those experiences where there was grief before there was even something to grieve, you know? There was, the layers of grief just became so wildly varied and transparent all at the same time. It was just, you know, it's just until you go through those things, you just can't even imagine what they entail. And yet we're all grieving, you know, we've all had grief. So it's such a wild subject. And I know we're just going to kind of touch on things because I think it's a subject that has so many layers to it. And I think everyone on the planet can relate on so many levels, even if they haven't lost anyone.
Right.
Just because every loss, from when you're a child and you broke your favorite toy, to your best friend moved away, to your grandparents passed away, to the loss of a pet, to, I mean, geez Louise, we could go on for days. Yeah. And grief, it's almost like it's always been there, and yet nobody knows.
Right. Underlying.
Yeah.
Yeah. You and I had a 5-hour conversation before I asked you to join me in this venture of this podcast. And we spoke a lot at length about grief and what it means to both of us. And you said some things that just were so amazingly deep and pivotal for me to think about, such as you just mentioned, we've all grieved things. And you don't, certain things that you grow up with and then you experience, you don't chalk it up to grief. But then that conversation, I walked away with realizing that, my God, you know, you're absolutely right. There's so much to it. And I started feeling little moments of grief when I was very young, for whatever reason, like you said.
Right. You
know, best friend moved away, blah, blah, blah. There's a million things that you start to experience, and it's chalked up to grief. But you made me realize that when I think I posed the question to you about how you would handle what you just came through 5 years ago, or less or more, as opposed to now, and the way that the timing of everything and how you handled it and are handling it still, it just blew me away. Can you revisit that with me a little bit so our listeners can feel that? Do you remember that conversation?
I do vaguely. Okay, so
like what you had been through up to that point has prepared you, because you were always a caretaker. You were always being there for people, and you know, you had so many years with your son up to that point, and then he left behind some babies which is a beautiful thing, thank God, and an amazing wife. And so you got to have those moments. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had those before. And you were a different person even prior to 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I think that it's kind of interesting because we spoke about the layers of our beingness, and those layers have to be there for you to survive something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not until we go through it that we realize they're even there. And that's where I think embracing that is where the changes occur. It's also very weirdly revealed to you during that whole entire time. And I think the whole 3.5 years, I don't remember breathing. I don't remember breathing at all from diagnosis, phone call to the end. You don't remember breathing, and you don't remember really having any conscious thoughts. But at the same time, the whole time there's this, I don't even know how to describe it, but there's this beautiful kind of energy that just seems to keep kind of wiping things clear. Like, I didn't know what mattered. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my life meant. I didn't know I was making choices. I made choices throughout the whole time. I mean, my son was 28 at the time. My oldest one was 31. So all those years of parenting, I had made choices that I kind of didn't even know what they meant. I didn't know, it's like creating a masterpiece that you don't see until it's done.
Right.
And not that part of my life is done or anything, but at the same time, there's something revealed in those moments that's so beautifully graceful and horrifying all at the same time. And you just try to just keep putting one foot in front of the other,
right,
while it's all going down. So I know that that's not the conversation that we had before, but
that we actually had like 16 podcasts in our 5-hour coffee break. It was amazing. And I knew that day I wanted to ask you. I knew before then I wanted to ask you to join me in this because, we have history, of course, but we don't know each other so well that these conversations are going to be like, numb, because there's so much about our lives that the other doesn't know. But when we get together, we can spend hours just sitting there talking, and it's a beautiful thing. And that conversation, one of the many topics, this one I left with probably impacted me the most because, I, as a mother and, thinking what you have gone through had to be one of the most difficult things in your life, obviously. But to be so graceful in your grieving and so open about it and handling it in a way that most of us would sit there and question, I don't think I could be as strong. We don't know that. And like you said, until you're faced with those moments, you don't know what you're capable of. But as an outsider looking at you and realizing what you are dealing with and what you have gone through for the last 4-ish years now, it's mind-blowing. And that's a compliment, if you want to even call it a compliment. I don't know if that's the right word. You are absolutely the most graceful, strong person I think I know. And that's why the tissue's for me. Anyway, it blows me away, and I love you to death. And I'm just, this has encouraged me to keep working through my personal grief. And I haven't lost anybody, like that. I mean, I've lost close family, close friends. But to be able to work through it and to come out not on the other side, but keep moving forward like you're doing and continue to dive deeper and peel back the layers and then kind of keep working it through your heart and mind and body and soul, and hopefully help other people. You're helping me, but the reason why we are here today is for this conversation to help somebody else that is dealing with something similar, losing a loved one and learning how to navigate through it. And if you want to call it successfully navigate through it, to use that as a catapult to get you to the other side, to be stronger. You've got grandbabies, you've got, other children, and you've got so much life to live and so much to give. And I admire the hell out of you, if that makes any sense, what I'm trying to say. What can you tell other people that are dealing with similar circumstances? What could your best advice and best loving advice be for these folks?
I think that one of the main things is it's okay to not feel like you can breathe, and it's okay to not feel like you're going to survive it. Because I, at no point in time during that entire process, felt like I was going to live through it. There were so many things that was your worst nightmare. I mean, that's just what you just know you wouldn't survive that if that occurred. And then we were in it. And wonderfully, we were dropped into it. We didn't get the choice. We didn't have to choose any of that. It was just that happened. And as it happened, and the days turned into months and years, and then all of a sudden it was just over. And it's very interesting how I didn't think I would survive. And then the morning after, my daughter-in-law and I, we got back late at night on the night that he passed. And that night we just slept on the couch and on the floor. We were just, she didn't want to go to bed, and we just slept. And then when we woke up the next day, I just had this wild realization of, oh crap, the sun comes up again.
Yeah.
And now we have to wake up and face a day.
Yeah.
And that was the first day. And then the next day, the sun comes up, and the sun just keeps coming up. And somehow you just keep waking up. And I literally think that's the most ridiculous advice. And at the same time, it's the only advice that would make sense. Because until you're in it and you're the one who's waking up, I don't think there's any way for you to process what that would be like.
Right.
But the most interesting thing that I've found with grief is, prior to now, I always felt like grief was a hole. I always thought loss and hole. It just always made me envision a hole in your life that you would never fill again.
Right.
That would just always be there, just this hole. And when you think about grief and multiple griefs in a lifetime, you start thinking, wow, that can really diminish you as a human being if you have that many. I mean, you and I spoke about, just because we're the youngest kids, you and I spoke about some of our earliest griefs were our older siblings were in relationships with people that we became close to, and then breakup, boom, and they're just gone and out of your life. And those were some of our first big griefs. That sounds ridiculous. And at the same time, they truly were an original breakup for us that we didn't even know happened.
Right.
So you feel like you pack your life with these losses, and at some point you would become much less of a human being with all of these holes and all of these voids. And the weird thing was, as I woke up every day, and as the days passed and passed and passed, I started to realize there wasn't a hole. There was a structure that had been built at that point. And it's almost like a bookmark. There's just a mark that signifies pre and post. And as you go along your lifetime from that perspective, you just realize that there's stamps. It's like having a time stamp on your life that says, I was here and he was here and now I'm here and maybe he's not. but I'll have more stamps on that timeline and it's just going to keep going. But they're not holes anymore. And I don't feel diminished anymore. I feel like there's more to me and there's more strength to me. And I think that structure that I feel is there is part of that strength.
Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah. And that to me is a victory, I mean, because grief can take you down the rabbit hole. It may not be a hole, but you can go down the hole. And to make sure that you don't go down the hole by whatever means necessary is so important. And to be able to stay focused, recognize the pre, and the post, and recognize how great things were at different seasons of all of your lives as a family, as a unit, and then on his own as a family and a unit, and cherish and love and be able to cherish those babies and, the life post it's absolutely invaluable. It's unbelievable. And the fact that you've been able to do that and still persevere, because if the average person that did not know you doesn't know anything about you and they met you today, and it's been not even 8 months, right?
Right.
Okay. They wouldn't know that you're not wearing that as your, armor and shield, or you're waving a flag. I'm a grieving mother. You don't put that out. You are putting out that you are, enjoying life post. You are persevering post. You are still making memories and adding to your life in a way that the average person could never do. I've known people personally that get lost in grief and they live in the past for the rest of their lives, 20 plus years later, whatever it is. And my wish for them is that they will find the strength and realize that's not what that person wants you to do. That person doesn't want you to circle the drain constantly on the verge of going down the hole. They don't want that for you because they loved you. So they wouldn't want you to do that. And that's what I always felt, when like one of my best friends, it'll be 5 years next month that he passed away out of the blue. And I have my moments, I mean, it's hard not to because there's so many memories. And just being in Ontario is a memory and a trigger and all that. But I know because of his personality and how he was all about Tiff, he just watched out for me like no other. And he would be pissed if I was going to circle the drain and teeter on the toilet. And every now and then I go down the rabbit hole a little bit, but I pick myself and say, okay, let's move on. He wouldn't want me to do that. And that's what's important, but not everybody has the strength to do that, to keep moving forward, to focus on these positives. And if it's distraction, if it's whatever it is, it's hard to do. So I think it's a beautiful thing, and you owe it to yourself and the rest of the family, to keep moving and to stay positive and stay present.
Definitely.
Present is huge because you've got so many wonderful things. As I do with my life, when you go have a moment where it sets you back in the, grieving, not so much losing somebody, but losing the family unit or whatever it is, it's put it in perspective and keep moving forward. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's
and the present moment will save your life. I mean, really.
That's true. That's true.
Just an awareness that there's a present moment. I think that is so crucial because it is a constant battle of am I projecting without him? Am I projecting prior to this happening? Going back to the past, whatever it is, the present moment will literally save your life.
Yeah. Wow. That's huge. That's true. And so moving forward from here and talking about this subject of grief, damn good and well you can handle anything at this point.
Definitely.
Hugely.
I have no doubt now.
Yeah.
And I always did. We spoke earlier about the insecurities and the beliefs that we have about ourselves. And mm-hmm. I always had those beliefs. I believed that everything that I've ever been through in my life, and we've been through some stuff, And I really believe that it all weakened me somehow. And this was the moment, this was the thing that finally screwed my awareness on straight, or however you want to put it, that none of that weakened me. I mean, every single bit of it has made me.
Yeah.
And that
prepared
you.
You
can't even, that's just, it's so weird to try to put into words for someone else's understanding, because it's such an embodied experience, such an embodied truth. I don't know how people, or what people need to hear to be able to experience those things. I just know what happened when it happened. Mm-hmm. And maybe that experience and maybe our losses are kind of like that. Maybe they are this embodied truth that is supposed to clue us into who we are. Unfortunately, sometimes it just hits those upside down beliefs that we have, and we think, oh man, oh gosh, I did something wrong, or I'm again weakened somehow. And no. And I just don't have that delirium anymore.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's nothing that can strip a person down to the core like loss and grief and whatever aspect it is for them personally, to where you are forced to really strip down. And you and I both believe that everything we've been through up to this point, that prepared you, for what you have gone through, and enabled you to be stronger than the average person, and be able to seek a deeper meaning through all of this, and know, okay, I need to be present, and I've got all these other people that rely on me, and I'm, I rely on them, and have that ability. And, we reflect a lot about our childhoods. It's just, because I believe we are, from birth, we are destined to be a certain thing or a certain person or a certain way. And, there's so much that you and I both have gone through with start overs and broken hearts and, this and that, and move here, bounce here, adapt as a single parent here. And each one of those phases and moments has some grief attached to it, because the loss of the potential family unit, or the, I have to move, or the whatever it is, be that single parent, that strong person. And then, something comes along and just knocks you off again. And you go, okay, here we go again. And it's this constant process, and losing loved ones along the way, and you name it. It brings you to this point. And so I don't want to switch channels, and like come onto my grief story. But everything that has happened up to in the last year and a half for me, I've experienced a situation where I didn't realize that it was actually grief that I was feeling, and still feel a little bit when it comes to, my whole family unit has changed. There was some betrayal and some horrible things that happened to my parents, that I was the one that dealt with most all of it, and got some things done that the results were a good outcome for my parents. But in the end, when it has to do with blowing up the family, it's not a good outcome. There's, people have their different versions of things and different views on things. And instead of the person that should be, on the outs, that's not the case. It ends up being me instead. And I've come to terms with that. Again, everything that's been happening to my life up to this point prepared me for this. I was the only one that could have done what was right and got it done, and I did. And I have zero regret. It's amazing how you look back on, when you're in the middle, like in the middle of the fire, and you're on this trajectory of, I'm going forward and I'm going to get some, justice and something done, and this person's going to pay, and my parents are going to be okay, and I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to sleep, I'm not going to be home for months at a time, I'm going to, give up my life. I'm going to focus on whatever it takes to get justice for my parents. And everybody says, yeah, you go, cheer on, you got this, you've got this. And then when this ball rolls and I do get justice for my parents and some in the form of money and that person has to pay the price to a certain extent, but not the full extent that I wanted, but what my parents were happy with. And that's what I did. On the flip side, it's like I'm the bad guy, and then I have to deal with the repercussions of that, what it does to the family, what it does to my parents, and how now the whole family dynamics are different. And again, I don't dive deep into this saying specifics because it doesn't really matter. What matters is that the perfect family that I had this vision that I've had my whole life has never been perfect. We spoke earlier on toxicity and trying to get rid of that. And being the youngest and all that, you always strive to be a part of the club and I want to be involved in this and look at me, I'm worth this. And realizing that none of that, I have this distorted view in my head of what I thought that I was to these people. Well, it doesn't turn out to be that way. So the whole situation's different now. And I have hit rock bottom, but grieved through that and bounced my way back up. And if it wasn't for plugging into positivity, being present for those that matter to me and I matter to them, knowing I'm going to be a grandma, next month, and having some amazing kids in my life. I've got, 4 great kids in my life, my 2 stepsons and my 2 daughters and my man and my beautiful home and gratitude, man. It's all about gratitude, being present and focusing on what matters most. And that saved me. Similar, but, different circumstances. And I think if I would have just focused on how I felt and how betrayed I felt and how hurt I felt in this process, I think I would have went down, I would have circled the drain and I would have went down the hole. And I'm so grateful that I didn't. And I prayed about it. I meditated about it. I dove deep. And I know John thought I was crazy when I finally got back home after all this, but I had to go through the grieving process and then turn around and find solutions to put that where it needs to go. And I have, and it's a wonderful, empowering feeling to be able to say that. And what I want, the reason why you and I are talking so bare, to the bones about this subject that's so personal to each of us is because there's somebody out there that's dealing with similar things. And our hope, and I can speak for you as well, is to help somebody to see that you don't have to circle the drain. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole. You don't have to be alone. You don't have to grieve in such a way that, nobody said you had to do this or had to do that. Nobody has a timestamp on grief. Nobody said that there's a playbook by it. You do what you need to do. And if you smile, it's okay. If you laugh, it's okay. If you put that toxic person in their place and walk away from them, that's okay. If you start to enjoy life, such as your situation, and move forward and be present in your grandkids' lives and your daughter-in-law and your other kids, that's okay. For some reason, people that grieve think that it's not okay to be happy anymore. It's like I don't want them to see me smile. I can't be happy because that's terrible. Well, it's terrible. It's really terrible. But nobody said that you had to stop living.
Right.
Right.
And there's no option. That's the thing about the sun just comes back every day. And at some point, I think you just do realize, begrudgingly, it happened again.
Yeah.
I think there's just that understanding that life does go on. And you want to play the game and you want to get back into it. And I don't suspicion that there will ever be a point where it goes away.
Right.
And I don't want it to. Yeah. Because if this is what I have left of him as this bookmark, then I really kind of want it to be there. I don't, if it was a hole, I might need something else. But feeling as if it's some sort of structure on the timeline of my life, I can look at it and really appreciate it and know that, yeah, that stamp, if that's what I have for this lifetime that's left of him, I mean, as far as him personally, yeah, I want it there. So, I mean, just like we talked about earlier, on my way over, I had a crying moment. I mean, sometimes when I'm in the car, sometimes with a certain song or whatever, it just kind of hits me, and it's not like it's gone anywhere, but I'm fine with that because I can still be present. I can still, I can feel it. And I know I'm going to step out of it at the same, soon. I just know that it's not going to be with me every minute of every day. He is, but the grief isn't.
Yeah.
And that's good with me.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you being willing to not only open up to me, but you're obviously opening up to people that we don't know.
Yikes.
Some strangers, right?
Right.
But I have a feeling that they will deeply appreciate you as well, as much as I do, with your willingness to be open and honest with your journey. And again, my message to whoever's listening that's dealing with this right now, any type of grief whatsoever, you don't have to do it alone. And I agree with you that it's good to feel, that feeling it is important, but don't let it consume you and define you. And that it's very important that you keep moving forward and live and be present, because there's other people out there that need you.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Thank you all for listening to our lovely podcast, Mahogany and Willow.
Because there's always something important to talk about.